Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today we're going to have an album battle. We are going to have a battle between Diamond David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile of 1986, and in the other corner we have Van Halen 5150. I have put together a super panel of experts. Joe B, welcome my mate. John the Music Nut, welcome my friend. And John Clauser, JC, how are you?
Doing good, guys. Doing good.
Great.
We're going to talk about the album, our first impressions in the day, pick two songs that we want to discuss, good, bad, or indifferent. And at the end of the show, we deem who our favorite album is, who is the winner. So why don't we start off with you, Joe? Why don't we start off with David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile? What was your first impressions of that album in the day?
Well, so Eat 'Em and Smile came out after 5150. So this whole era musically for me was a low point. I was graduating college and I feel like I wasted like my entire life because I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. Cliff Burton dying in Metallica really had a negative effect on me. I just thought the music coming out wasn't that, I don't know, it wasn't resonating with me, but I was incredibly dumbfounded and pissed that this was happening to Van Halen because 1984 was such a huge hit. And this band was on the cusp of being the American Rolling Stones or the American Led Zeppelin. And I was a fan of Van Halen from day one. And I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact this was actually happening. Did Dave get kicked out? Did he quit? You know, is Eddie crazy? So anyway, so if we start with Eat 'Em and Smile, 5150 had already been released. And when I got 5150, we'll talk about that, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. But what pissed me off about Van Hagar, as we'll say, was when I saw him live and they really didn't play any Van Halen songs. It was basically, they played basically the whole 5150 album. They played rock and roll. They played some Sammy Hagar tunes. I wasn't a big Hagar fan. So when Eat 'Em and Smile came out, when it actually came out, I was more in the David Lee Roth camp because I was so angered by what I saw live. Then I saw Dave on the tour and it was more of a Van Halen show.
John the Music Nut, what was your first impression of David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile when it came out?
I dug it. It continued it continued that same spirit of Van Halen had, which I didn't think Van Halen was the same without David. I thought this was a monster of an album. I mean, just look at the talent around him. Yeah, he was doing the covers, which they typically like to do, but when David did covers, it was different. He made those songs his own because he had so much charisma. And I really dug this record when it first came out, and I think it is aged quite well also.
Okay, thank you. And John,
one thing I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, but I did know of the band Talus through this guy I mentioned on the Creatures of the Night tour. There was a guy I was in contact with named Bob Muldowney. So this band Talus from Buffalo, New York had this phenomenal bass player, Billy Sheehan. So I knew that when I saw Shy Boy on the album, I knew that was already a great song.
Yeah, Billy Sheehan. JC, what was your first impression of this album?
Well, for me, I was already kind of like Joe's alluded to. With me, I was just getting into guitar playing. So I was reading the Guitar for Practicing Musician quite a lot. And so I was familiar with who Billy Sheehan was from his Bass Secrets column. And then when he got signed on for the David Lee Roth band, I thought, okay, this is going to be good. Then, of course, Steve Vai was another darling that they were talking a lot about because he just joined Alcatraz and he'd been through all that. So I was a big fan of like the Fair Warning. Fair Warning was my introduction to Van Halen. So I like that kind of style. So for me, I was anxious to listen to Eat 'Em and Smile. And what I liked it. I liked it in the beginning. There were certain, I'll go into it more when I talk more about it, but as a young guitar player, there was stuff about it that attracted me quite a bit to the album. So, and it still doesn't sound too bad today to me. I've actually enjoyed listening to it again recently. So there you go.
Okay. No, thanks, John. I guess for me, I was a huge Van Halen fan, and discovering Van Halen 1 was just a revelation in my hard rock listening ears. And 1984 was a huge smash in Australia. Jump was number one or thereabouts. And, following David Lee Roth and Van Halen through the video shows, I think what preceded this was an EP, which was called Crazy from the Heat. And he had that hit with California Girls. So he was definitely this larger than life character that we, kind of goofy. You could see he was kind of intelligent, very articulate, very smart. And you went along for the ride. And I was chomping at the bit to get this album. And when I played it, I went, wow, this is great, because it showed a lot of virtuosity. And it still had a little bit of edge, and it had that sort of David Lee Roth personality in spades. And you could see by the Yankee Rose, which we'll get into, I'm sure one of us will talk about it with the video clip. It's his personality to the power of 10. But I just really, I consumed this album. I loved it. So that was my first impression in the day. All right, so we'll go across to you, Joe. Maybe spotlight 2 songs off the album that you'd like to, have a bit of a chat about. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Definitely Shy Boy, because I knew the song already from the Talus album. And I was excited about Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan being in the band, because they started getting the reputation. I knew Billy Sheehan was already an incredible bass player, and he did things I've never heard before in my life on the bass. So Shy Boy was the first song I was really excited to hear. And then I'm actually going to go with Going Crazy, because, when you go back to the whole synth thing, the jump thing, and you will touch on it with 5150, I think Dave does it great here. That's not taken away from the harder songs on the album, but those are the 2 standout songs for me when I first got the album, and still when I listen to it subsequently, those are the 2 songs that really stand out for me. So Shy Boy, just because I previously knew it was a kick-ass song, and Going Crazy, which I think is just a great, goes into that jump area, and I think it's just a great pop song.
Sure. John the Music Nut, any 2 songs that you'd like to spotlight off this album?
Surely. Well, I saw the MTV debut of the Yankee Rose video before the album came out, and when I heard that, I was so pleasantly, I knew it would be good, but it blew me away. And it was just, the video was so over the top, but the song, which is a tribute to the Statue of Liberty, it's just a fantastic song. It still sounds exciting. They're just, the musicianship around them. They got their act down, but David is, this is his big moment here. He sings, this is one of the best songs he ever did on his own. And it was just so over the top, but yet so catchy. The musicianship was awesome. The video was amazing. He was personality times 10. I think about that video now and I still smile, because it was just all a big party, and it was great. Now, my other one is going to be Elephant Gun. And the reason I pick Elephant Gun is because Billy goes nuts on this. His bass playing on this is insane during the verses. Then he gets a little solo before Steve Vai gets in with his solo. When I think of this song, I think a little bit of Loss of Control from Women and Children First, that reckless abandon. And here he pulls it off with his own band, and he takes that style and he makes it even better. And when Van Halen would try to do this with Sammy, it never quite worked, because Sammy didn't have that natural charisma about him. So those are the 2 that stand. I love nearly every song, but those two stand out to me.
Nice. No, thanks, John.
Sure.
JC.
Well, Joe kind of stole my thunder with one of his picks, but I got to show you this magazine here. So this is, and look at some of the songs that's listed in this magazine for tabs. So you got 5150 here as well. So that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But Shy Boy was in this one. So of course, me as a young guitar player trying to learn how to play Shy Boy at 260 beats a minute. Well, yeah, that's not gonna happen. But Shy Boy was obviously a monster track for me. But for me, the other two, the two songs I kind of want to mention here, Tobacco Road was a song I really tried. I got the tab for. I wish I still had the magazine for. I got the tab and I tried to learn. I was trying to sight read the tab and try to learn how to play that. And I feel like I did pretty good with the rhythm back then. And I even tried the biisms and all that stuff. So Tobacco Road was a pretty cool song for me to try to learn. And going back and listening to this, a song that really stood out to me was just the slinkiness and the soulfulness of Ladies' Night in Buffalo. I kind of like that sexy feel about that whole song. Steve Vai's little, everybody's just playing so good in that song, and it's just a sexy, sultry song. And I forgot how much I really liked it, and that was in a magazine too. And I wish I still had it, but yeah, for me, Ladies' Night in Buffalo and Tobacco Road. Obviously, Shy Boy is going to be the big winner for me. But yeah, just to give you two different songs, those are going to be my two.
Great, thank you. Well, I think if David Lee Roth was going to be putting a band together, he'd have to pick a crack lineup of musicians, and boy, did he do it. And I think for a period of time, I was convinced that Steve Vai was the best electric rock guitarist in the world, because on this album, he does all these different styles of guitar play. He does jazz, he does funk, he does metal, he shreds. Complete versatile. And this was a really shot over the bow at the Van Halen camp. Even though the album sales, I was actually quite surprised, didn't really compare with Van Halen. This only went to number 3, single platinum, and the rest of the world, it didn't chart as well as at a Van Halen album. So I'm just wondering, maybe the public were a little bit over Lee Roth. But this album it's got his personality in spades, because David Lee Roth loves the vaudeville. He loves the Vegas. He loves the shooby-dooby type of music. And I love, his versions of Tobacco Road. I think it swings. It's got a groove to it. And he's just got that shazba. I don't know. I just made up that word. I like it. I think he's just got he's got that sort of, I don't know, he's got that swing. He's like a metal version of Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Shy Boy, got to get things moving till my personality starts improving. Do you think Sammy would do that lyric? Would be as an insightful? God, no.
The thing is, that wasn't his lyric. That was already a Tallis lyric.
But it fits him. It does him so perfectly.
Because Billy wrote it for Dave. I also find it
interesting that
with David Mine.
Billy Sheehan's from Buffalo, but he doesn't get a writing credit on Ladies' Night in Buffalo. I always found that.
But the material suits him, Joe, to a T. It's just sort of like if someone was choosing all these tracks, it just suits his personality. Yankee Rose, you've got to pick it. It's got his personality in spades. I love the Vai sound effects. What? That's sort of like the sounds that he's getting out of the guitar sounds like a cartoon character, and it's just larger than life. It's just so vibrant. I'm Easy. Again, I like that. It's got, like all these little jazz classics. No, look, for me, probably Shy Boy and Yankee Rose are my pick of the bunch. But boy, oh boy, putting a band together, he couldn't have got a better band of musicians. And Billy Sheehan, he's like the Eddie Van Halen of bass, isn't he? You just listen to those bass lines. He's just, the runs up the fretboard. superlative musicians. So, Joe, I might flick to you and talk about the live experience, because I saw David Lee Roth as well, maybe on the Skyscraper tour. But tell me, what are your recollections of seeing DLR around this era?
It was more like a Van Halen show than Van Halen, because he actually played Van Halen music. He incorporated stuff from the first 4 or 5 albums, whereas Van Hagar didn't. So I was more impressed with that. I was blown away by Steve Vai playing. He was doing Eddie's licks. It was almost like he was trying to make him look easy. I remember there was one song where I think it was Running with the Devil, where he just put the guitar on and played the lead like a piano, and he was flipping the guitar around like this. He's like, he's nothing. I'm a much better guitar player. So it was definitely him getting this over the top superior band to show everybody. And let's not forget Greg Bassinet on drums too. So he went all in, and live it was a great experience.
Yeah, nice. John or Joe, or the two Johns, did either of you see DLR in this era?
I never did.
Yeah. I saw the Skyscraper tour, and so by this point, Billy was already off the touring band, because I think he was getting ready to put Mr. Big together. So Greg's brother was actually on bass, I think, for that show. But again, yeah, you've a lot of good mix of Van Halen songs with the first two stuff from the first 2 albums. And I think David was on like a surfboard through the top of this arena, and I think they even pulled like the little steel drums, and they did like a little steel drum solo type of thing. So yeah, it was definitely a very entertaining show. I don't remember the set list to save my life, but I never got to see Van Halen in concert. So that was the closest I got to seeing something of Van Halen like. So it was a great show.
Yeah. Well, similar in Australia, we were starved for concerts per se, or anything hard rock or heavy metal. And we didn't get Van Halen till much later. But I saw the David Lee Roth Skyscraper tour, and he was just a lot of fun. And he did the surfboard through the middle of the audience, did a little acoustic set. I think he did a couple of Everly Brothers songs, Wake Up Little Susie, with the acoustic guitar. But they played half a dozen Van Halen songs like Panama, Jump, Ain't Talking About Love. It was like, you can't have the, Van Halen, but he'll play the songs, and it sounded just spick. And
I want to say, if in my show, I think he may have even played Unchained, which would have made me happy, but I couldn't remember that to save my life.
Yeah, but the band was just it was absolutely crack. They were on fire, and it was the lineup of the Eat 'em and Smile. So, okay, well, I guess we all agree, pretty good album. Let's go across and flip the coin to 5150. Now, this came out, so Eat 'em and Smile came out in July of 86, but as Joe said, 5150 actually came out earlier, and that came out in March 24, 1986. This went 6 platinum, US number 1, Australia number 5, UK number 16. It's sold by the truckful, had a couple of radio-friendly hit singles. Joe, what was your first impression of this album in the day?
Well, I begrudgingly bought this album, and I also bought it at the same day I bought Judas Priest Turbo. And you know how I feel about Turbo, Peter.
Ooh.
I'm not a fan. So I put it on, and I was actually pleasantly surprised, because I didn't know what to expect, and I was very angry that this whole thing was happening with Van Halen. So the Hello Baby line, I'm like, okay, this is Sammy trying to be David Lee Roth. And I liked the album. I mean, subsequently now, if I go to a Van Hagar album, this is my last choice, believe it or not. But I was pleasantly surprised with the album, and I listened to it quite frequently at the time, because I thought the songs were good. And what turned me off is when I eventually saw them live. And then
all right,
what came after that. So,
yeah, we'll talk about the live when we do the round robin. John the music nut, what was your first impression of 5150?
Well, they played Why Can't This Be Love on the radio before the album came out. So I got a sense already. And I like that song a lot, even though it was carried by the keyboard, but so was Jump. So that was okay. But it was more poppy, but it was still a really well done song. It was still catchy. And I liked the album. I thought they went a little too keyboard heavy on the other two big hits from the album, which were Dreams and Love Walks In. I thought it was just too much. But when they rocked, I mean, it still rocked, but it wasn't quite the same. There were songs on here I really dig to this day, but I was more into the David album than I was into 5150, even though I did like it.
Okay. And John, what was your first impressions of this album?
Well, like John said, I had heard the Why Can't This Be Love. A buddy of mine actually had a 45. And so the flip side of that is actually the song I'll talk about later. I won't go into it now. But John's smiling, so he knows what it is. But anyway, it was a totally different band. I mean, just completely different band than what I was used to with Fair Warning, 1984, Diver Down, Women and Children First, all those. I'm just like, what happened here? But, when there were certain songs that did stand out to me, and those are the ones I actually wound up listening to more often than the whole album. Unlike Eat 'Em and Smile, 5150, I didn't listen to as a full album. I didn't tend to. There were certain songs I liked the most, and that's what I tended to gravitate towards. But yeah, totally different band. Unlike Joe, though, I think for me, I think actually OU812 would probably be the last one I go to. But there's reasons why I do kind of put that below 5150.
Oh, well, you've just got to finish what you start, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to find the best of both worlds with this one. So
yeah.
Oh well, we're gonna all eat pound cake. Boom, boom. Anyway, look, 5150. Why Can't This Be Love was the radio hit, and I liked it. I thought it was a great pop song. It, it's got that synth guitar pseudo lead break, but I'm a David Lee Roth Van Halen fan, and I've always felt that Van Hager was just keeping the seat warm and David would come back. It's always been, album after album is going, okay, well, maybe he'll be back the next album.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't want to interrupt, but you nailed it, because I kept on, all right, when's this experiment going to end? That's what I kept on, every album that would come out. Okay, this has got to end, get Dave back.
And they brought in a person that turned it into basically a very much an American-orientated rock album. And that was my first impressions. This album has a few flourishes of hard rock and heavy metal, but for the most part, it's very safe, it's very corporate, and it sounded to me in the day very much like an AOR. And when you look at the producer, it's produced by Mick Jones. So I think Eddie Van Halen was looking at Agent Provocateur, which was an uber hit for Foreigner, which had the mix of balladry, I Want to Know What Love Is, and then it had these little rockers like Tooth and Nail. And he said, I want to have more. I want to have that. And that's what he got, 5150. So it was a kind of a blend where you have a few little rockers for the guys, but much more balladry. And to me, I kind of was a little bit disappointed. I thought it was solid, but I wasn't enthused because 1984 was just such a great album, and all those old albums, I really missed it. Anyway, off my soapbox, back to you, Joe. Why don't you focus on two songs? Tell us what you think, good, bad, or indifferent, on 5150.
Well, I'm going to focus on the keyboard heavy songs because they were the ones that really blew me away. And I still think they stand up as good pop songs. And Eddie, I mean, yeah, he had Jump, and he was going more this direction on 1984. So I think Why Can't This Be Love is a great pop metal song. I can listen to it. Sammy plays it with his circle band, and they do a really good job with it. I just want to say I am not a big Sammy Hagar fan outside of Van Hagar, except for the Montrose album, which I think is phenomenal. But I didn't like Sammy's solo stuff at all for the most part. I thought it was very average at best. But I'm going with Why Can't This Be Love, and also Dreams. Again, I think Sammy's vocals are great. It was a really good departure. It was something new. I thought it was groundbreaking. So I don't know. I really don't know if they were playing it safe here. I think Eddie was just doing what Eddie wanted to do. And as far as Dave and the band, after reading Noel Monk's book and interviewing him and reading other things, it seems more like Dave wanted to leave than the other way around. It was and Eddie was desperate to find a singer and just came along with Sammy Hagar because they like cars, and it came together. But yeah, those are the two songs I'm going to go. I actually think Eddie was just being Eddie. I don't think he was trying to play it safe. I never could figure out how they got Mick Jones as a producer, but I was. It's interesting that they didn't have Ted Templeman, and Ted Templeman went with David Lee Roth on his. So
yeah, that's
very songs telling. I'm going to go with, because those are the two songs I'm going to go with.
Nice. John, the music. No, what do you reckon? Two songs.
Okay. First, I'll go with one I really, really dig and dug it from the first time I heard it, and that's Summer Nights. I think Summer Nights is the best chorus on the album. I always like that little groove that they're going on. Mm-hmm. And they still really utilize Michael Anthony's backing vocals. I thought Michael Anthony was always the secret weapon in that band. I mean, he was always a solid bass player. He was more adventurous early on, but his backing vocals were fantastic. I thought that brought a different dimension to them, along with David's over-the-top charisma. But I thought that song kicked butt. I mean, that sounds more like the older VH. But I mean, it was just a very catchy track. Now, on the other hand, I never cared for Love Walks In. I thought, outside of Michael's backing vocals at the very end and Eddie's guitar solo, I thought the song was faceless. It sounds like something that could have been recorded by a lot of other different bands at that time. It never did much for me. And even now when I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, I was right when I was 15. This really isn't a great song. I mean, at the time, I guess a lot, they had that momentum going, but I don't think the song has aged very well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John Clauser.
Okay, so I alluded to this magazine, and for me, the title track 5150. I again trying to learn this little thing and try to sight read this thing. Yeah, that wasn't easy for a 17-year-old guitar player who only been playing for a couple of years and really wasn't all that good to begin with. But anyway, I love 5150. I love kind of the whole mix of the half time and the double time speed that they went. There was something about that whole groove that just, it rocked good. The lyrics I don't really know what the lyrics were really about, but whatever it was a good performance by Sammy. I always was a big fan of 5150. So that's going to be my pick for the good song. Now, I alluded to the B-side for Why Can't This Be Love? Now, it was this little fast, crazy track called Get Up. Back in the day when I was 16, 17 years old and I heard that song, I thought, oh, wow, this is heavy. It's great. Boy, I listen to it now. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Alex is all over the place with those awful drums, those electronic drums for the most part. The only thing that's not was probably the snare, well, maybe the snare, but the kick drums. But it's just, the song is so fast. and it's like it's like they're trying to do a speed metal song, and it's just like, it doesn't work. You know, again, when I was 16, 17, yeah, it was great. Boy, what a mess. Absolute mess of a song. It's a skipper for me. And if I really wanted to throw another one, I would probably have picked Inside, but I don't want to steal your thunder, Peter, in case you had to say something about that. But for me, boy, Get Up is just an absolute mess. Do
you think they were trying to do Hot for Teacher again with Get Up?
I don't know what the heck they were trying to do.
Close, but it has that tempo.
It does, but I got nothing.
Everyone, I'll put John Klaus's email address on the bottom if you want to send some love mail to John about that comment. But John Klaus, I don't like Get Up Party.
Sorry
is the hardest word to say sometimes. All right, thank you. Just writing it down. All right. I'm going to pick Why Can't This Be Love, because I think it's a killer pop song, not hard rock, pop song.
Right.
It's a great pop song, and it's catchy. I like Dreams. The video clip, the Top Gun. It's got a little bit of, it's AOR, but it's kind of compelling. It's catchy. It's a nicely constructed song. But look, out of all the Sammy Hagar albums, I think this is probably the best of the bunch, and that's saying something, because there is a lot of variable quality. The thing I think is, I was playing this album the last week. The thing that stuck out on this album was the production's terrible. The drum sound is so thin. You've got all these really bad synth drums. Alex usually has a lot of oomph and a lot of, guts, and there's a lot of guts in the bottom end. But in this album, it's really trebly and very light and very thin. And I'm just wondering, were they trying to change the sound so it would translate more into AM radio? Yeah, the production's terrible. It definitely it needs a remix. There's a lot of songs on this album that sort of reference David Lee Roth and that era. There's even one of the last songs on the album where, Sammy Hagar's referencing, I got the job, so there's a lot of self-referential. I think it's just a well-styled, solid, American-orientated rock band, and that's what Van Halen became. So, all right. Well, Joe, you saw Van Halen in the day with Sammy Hagar. Any recollections that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, but before that, so this is my latest book that I read on Van Halen. It's called Eruption. There's about 4 Van Halen books that I would recommend to get a comprehensive, biography on the band. But according to this book, it was pretty much a Dave camp and an Eddie camp, and Ted Templeman was in the Dave camp. So he went with Don Landy and Mick Jones, and that's where the production thing comes in. I don't think anything. I think everything was organic with Eddie. Honestly, that's just my opinion. I don't think anything. I just think he wrote the way he wrote, and it just came out the way it came out. Seeing them live, I was friggin' pissed. I'm like, why are you playing Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin? Why are you open up with I Can't Drive 55? I'm like, where's the Van Halen songs? They played almost the whole 5150 album. They threw in 2 Sammy Hagar songs and did a couple covers. And they did Jump, Ain't Talking About Love. I don't even know if they, and You Really Got Me. And I was expecting, okay, this album's not bad. We're still going to hear Unchained. We're still going to hear, when the whatchamacallit, I'm blanking now, Women and Children's first song for Warning songs, none of it. They'd skipped all those albums, and I walked out of there. I was like, this sucks. So that kind of just really put me on a negative. For years, I was very negative on Van Hagar just for that fact. And I saw them actually every tour with Van Hagar. And it was just disappointment after disappointment in that era. But I do think, I'll stop there. The live tour was a big disappointment.
Well, let me ask this, Joe, because I'm curious. What would Sammy Hagar sound like singing "In the Cradle Will Rock"? Well, maybe that would be a good one. Jamie's Crying, or one of the to
I
these
think-
ears. I don't know if it would have sounded all that good. It's just like when they toured for Different Kind of Truth, they didn't do any Sammy songs because I don't think David could have done the Sammy songs.
But why would he?
That's true. Why
David
would he?
said what David has always said. Why would I sing those songs? I've got a.
I think
And maybe Sammy felt the same way.
Sammy could have pulled it off. Yeah, that's he's a good singer. He still has a great voice for his age. And, they were considering on the first album, Ted Templeman was considering sacking David Lee Roth for Sammy Hagar, because he worked with Montrose. So I think they could have pulled it off. Other bands have pulled it off. It was a Van Halen show. It was supposed to be a Van Halen show. And I was just incredibly pissed that they didn't play hardly any Van Halen songs. And they're playing cover tunes. And they're playing Sammy Hagar solo songs. I'm like, who's running the band here? Is it Eddie's band or is it Sammy's band? I can't drive 55 at a Van Halen show. I'm sorry. I'm out.
Yeah. So. Well, when you look at the marriage, Sammy's actually marrying up. When you think about it, so you got Van Halen here, and Sammy had a solid solo career. So he's actually marrying up into. But
if you read his book, if you read the book Red, his biography, now it's a great read. But then you don't know what's BS and what's real, what's Sammy talking and what's real. But according to Sammy, he was so much better off financially than Van Halen at the time because Van Halen was getting jobbed by their management and the record deals. And he had a great manager. Sammy's manager took over the band, Ed Loeffler. So I don't that musically, you're right. Financially, according to Sammy, he was much better off than the Van Halen band because of the deals that Van Halen signed. I don't know if that, you read Noel Monk's book and then you get a different picture, but I don't know. It's very interesting. Like I said, there's like 4 or 5 books people need to read to form their own opinions of what's going on here.
Like everyone was in the frame to join Van Halen. Like Jimmy Barnes had been asked. I'm sure if they were in the band, they won't be playing Cold Chisel songs, or so maybe because they wanted to get into that broader audience. They did a few of the Sammy solo album tracks in the show. But Joe, I've got a question for you. The makeup of the audience, was it just the mum and dads, were they attracting that audience? The Joe? No, so here's just the average Joe sort of audience.
This is one of my wife's favorite bands, and she's a few years younger than me. I mean, favorite albums of all time. This is way low in the totem pole for me. So it was a mixture of you had your Van Halen fans, but you had a newer fan base coming up because it was a number 1 album and it had a lot of radio airplay and it sold 6 million copies. So it was a sort of a different crowd. But I mean, you've experienced that with a lot of different bands. But that's as far as I can remember. Yeah, a lot more. I guess it's hard to say because the girls always liked Van Halen and liked David Lee Roth, but I think it was even more so of that. And you saw that with a lot of bands. You saw that with Def Leppard. You saw it eventually with Aerosmith and. More of a
broader female
crowd.
Broader female audience.
Right.
John the Music Nut, did you see Van Halen with Sammy Hagar?
I saw him with Sammy. I saw him on the Balance tour.
Right.
And they were good live. Eddie sounded fantastic, but they were good live, but it wasn't like I felt like I wanted to see them again after the show was over. I mean, at that point, I think they might have only been doing Jump and You Really Got Me live from the David era. I know they did a lot. And one thing about them that I always noticed, when they would have a new album out and they were touring it, they would hit that new album really hard. They would almost play the whole album. And Balance was a weak album. That was an album I thought I liked a lot at first, but when I go back now, there might have been only 2 really good songs on it.
Mm.
So they hit that album hard, and I mean, I think they did Not Enough, which was the ballad from the album, and that's when everybody was just going to the restroom, you know. But when Eddie was doing his solo, I mean, everyone stood to attention. You know, so I thought they were good live. I saw Sammy live with his solo band a year later, and I actually thought Sammy on his own was much better.
Yes.
It was more of a party.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I've only seen Van Halen once, and I saw him with David Lee Roth in Sydney. And I'm lucky I did, because Eddie was, passed away a couple of years later. So it was on the tail end of A Different Kind of Truth. It was a one-off show in Sydney, and I was very blessed to see that. And it had Wolfgang on bass, so I didn't see Michael and Anthony, but I would have, had cut off an arm and a leg to see that original.
Wolfgang's playing reminded me a lot of Billy Sheehan.
It was so much in the mix. Yeah. The bass was just pushed up.
Right.
It was sort of like where I was standing in front of the stage. Have you ever been to a concert where the bass is just so loud you can actually feel yourself be pushed back? It was like that. They really ramped up the bass, but it was a great show, and David was doing his Vegas and the shooby dooby wah, sort of routine. But I like it. I like that shtick, and he's got personality. I actually bought the Van Halen Right Here, Right Now on vinyl, the concert LP. The playing's fine, but my oh my, Sammy Hagar's stage patter is terrible. Oh, here's another song. And
apparently for Sammy, that was the last straw. He was out because they brought him back to mix it, and they were fighting over the mix. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've seen him on Fair Warning, Diver Down, 1984, and then I saw him on 5150. Oh, you wait 1-2 on the Monsters of Rock. Saw him on the Unlawful. Yeah. With Alice Chains opening up. I saw him on Balance, but then I saw him 3 times on the reunion with Dave as well. And so, I've seen him quite a bit.
But just from a performance point of view, it's like night and day, isn't it, really? Because Sammy's very straightforward. He's very serious. There's not a lot of humor. And when he tries it, it comes across as, it falls flat. But David has just got so much personality. And to me, that's part of the magic of the band. So, all right. Well, guys, it's adjudication time. So, Joe B, is it 5150 or is it Eat 'em and Smile?
Man, this is tough because as I said, I own thousands of albums, and I don't know if I ever would revisit either of these. They both have not aged well for me. Man, you know what? I'm going 5150 so I don't piss my wife off.
Radio.
Just by a hair. There's songs that I like in the David Lee Roth, but he hasn't aged well, his solo. But Shy Boy is so awesome. But then he's got, I'm Easy and That's Life on there. I'm going to have to go with 5150 by a hair.
Okay.
But if it was either or I'd never go back to listen to either of these albums, honestly.
Mate, I need to give you a tissue. I can see the sweat pouring off your face. Just you're in conflict.
Yeah,
which one are you going to choose?
And I know the other 2 guys are going to pick David Lee Roth, so I'll be the outlier. So
okay, John the Music Nut. Is it Eat 'em and Smile or is it 5150?
It's Eat 'em and Smile. It's aged better, much better recording. Songs are stronger overall. Talent around David was amazing. It's a great party album. I think it's aged well. Yes, definitely go with that one. I mean, all the songs are pretty good. I mean, whereas on 5150 you have a couple of clunkers in my opinion. So yeah, definitely go Eat 'em and Smile.
Okay. And Mr. Klauser, what's your pick?
Same thing. Eat 'em and Smile, basically for the same reasons that my co-captain on Wasp Wednesday talked about. So, yeah, there's just the 5150's just got some clunkers, and it just doesn't sound good to me. It didn't do well for me over the years. Whereas it was a breath of fresh air hearing Edelman Smile again. It just was that interplay between Vi and Sheehan did it for me. So yeah, good. Edelman Smile.
Nice. Well, I'm going to pick Edelman Smile because it's an album I put on, and as soon as Yankee Rose comes on, I have a smile on my face. And I just think there's so much joy and exuberance on the album, and the playing is just outerworldly. I love it. 5150, it's solid. It's good AOR. It's got some mighty fine tracks, but there are some clunkers there. And unfortunately, I am very much in the David Lee Roth is Van Halen. And that probably overhangs and taints my views. Thank you, guys. As always, you bring it home. Joe B, wonderful to have you back on the channel. We'll do a show very soon.
Anytime.
John Clauser, My Music Corner. Check out Wasp Wednesdays. Plenty of great content. And John the Music Nut, always to have you on the show, buddy.
Thank you.
One thing's for sure, we'll get these group of merry men back for another panel next month, and we'll pick another album battle. See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.